Good evening, everybody. Welcome. We're going to begin the City Council Committee on Finance meeting this evening. It's Monday, October 5th, 2020. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, could you do a roll call, please?
Chairman Leosi.
Present.
Vice Chairwoman Ryan. Present. Did you say present?
Yes, you said present.
Councilwoman Castillo.
Just keep rolling, no?
Is absent. Councilman Anthony. Is absent. Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Yes, 3 present and 2 absent.
All right.
Quorum.
Everybody speak a little bit louder, okay? So before we begin, I'd like to welcome back our City Clerk, Sean Selleck. As you can see, he's at the helm this evening, as well as congratulating his wife and him on their new addition. I think it's Luca.
Yes.
And how many pounds? How big?
7 pounds, 4 ounces.
7 pounds, 4 ounces. So we want to say congratulations. Let's bring in some positive news. Congratulations to the Sellecks. Okay?
Does he live on the second floor? Wasn't that a song? My name is Luca.
Live on the second floor.
I think I remember that song.
I remember that.
I don't know the song, but thank you, Councilman Taylor. We appreciate your what do you call it, pop culture reference. How's that?
Did he bring the baby? Did he bring the baby with him? Because he can bring the baby to work. That's okay.
Yes, he can bring the baby to work if he wants to. That'll be his call. I don't know if his wife's going to let him, but we'll go from there.
Okay.
Let the record reflect that Councilwoman Helen Anthony is present. Great, thank you. So it's always good to talk about some good positive news. So that's where we're going, okay? So much negativity around us. We're going to keep on trying to police some positive stuff. With that also, it's a couple items. I need the committee members. We're going to continue to the next finance meeting. I need to take items 6 and 7 out of order. Can I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Vice Chair makes that motion. Have a second?
Second.
By Councilman Anthony. Discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion to continue items 6 and 7 to the next finance meeting.
So moved.
Vice
Second.
Chair?
Second.
By Councilman Anthony. Councilman Taylor. Discussion, all in favor? Aye. Let the record reflect that Councilman Pedro Espinal is present, as well as we have Jimmy Lombardi, the City Treasurer, Gina Costa, the Internal Auditor, our Chief of Staff, I believe, and our Deputy Chief, and of course we have Kenny Cheverini from the City Solicitor's Office as our advisor. Also, let's make a motion, at this time to take items 1, 2, and 3, and make a motion to continue those items to the next finance meeting.
So moved.
Vice Chair?
Second.
Councilman Taylor, Councilwoman Anthony, discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Next item, Madam Clerk, item number 4, please.
Resolution authorizing approval of the following contract extension award by the Board of Contracts and Supply in accordance with Section 21-26A of the Code of Ordinances, Waste Management of Rhode Island Department of Public Works.
Okay, so before we begin, Mr. Clerk said he wanted me to reference something. Mr. Clerk, could you reference something to our committee members and to the public, you said?
Yes, just wanted to remind everyone that the exhibits that are going to be entered this evening, they are available on the agenda or on the website that we put on the agenda. That is the short URL, PED budget. I go that real quick, just for those of you that don't know where it is. Do that real quick. Just real quickly, if you see this link here, the bit.ly PVD 2021-budget, if you were to open that up, then it would take you straight to a web page where you can see the exhibit that will be introduced. Thanks.
With that, let's swear the witnesses in, and then we'll go from there. I think, is it Mr. Parada, Mr. Mancini, and Ms. Severa, are they going to be speaking on this matter? I believe so. Mr. Clerk, could you swear those three individuals in?
Will you please raise your right hand? Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
I do.
Please
Lawrence
state-
J. Mancini, Chief Financial Officer, City of Providence.
Ms. Severa is muted.
Sarah Silveria, Finance Director.
Thank you. All right.
Leo
So,
Parada, Director of Public Works, City of Providence.
All right, thank you all. Last time we met, one of the things this matter was about the $7.1 million waste management contract with the City of Providence and Waste Management to handle our garbage disposal and recycling and mattress disposal, et cetera. One of the things that was interesting is that one thing I'm always proud of the Finance Committee. Fortunately, during at least my tenure is it's always been a working committee. So we've been able to bring items before this Finance Committee, and then we, in the whole public forum, working with our partners in government as well as other council colleagues, we see some issues and problems, and we can also solve those problems in a working process in this committee. And this evening, it looks like we potentially have a solution to one of the issues we talked about. If everybody remembers, the last go-round, when Mr. Parada submitted his proposal to the contract extension, we further delved into it, and then we found out that there were certain aspects of this contract in which if the city extended it for another year, it would then qualify for a certain amount of money, about $250,000 and eventually up to $750,000, if I remember correctly. And one of the issues was, of course, we kept on talking about, I know Councilman Taylor, I think, brought up, and other council members, about mattresses in our city. We have got mattress problems pre-COVID, we got mattresses during COVID, we got mattresses post-COVID, right? So one of the issues was that we said, how can we solve that problem? And I think we're going to be able to present it. And we talked about, well, what if we simply extend it by a year, which then, triggers the ability for the city to acquire that funding, and let's use that funding to help pay for the cost of mattress pickup for our constituents, as well as to help pay for or to mitigate the cost to the city for disposal of used mattresses. And that issue was brought up to Mr. Parada, and we talked about how maybe we could go that extra step, which we can do a couple things. One, of course, is that we don't tie down the future mayor and the future council for many, many years. It's just a contract that will go into 6 months into the next term, not 3 or 4 years into the next term. So then by us just going 6 months into the next term, we can then obtain and get that additional funding, and then also potentially apply it to this mattress abatement or mitigating the mattress costs and disposal fees for our constituents and for the city. So I'm going to, I know that Gina, you on the line, Gina Costa?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm here.
So Gina, I know you and Mr. Parada, so I can have Mr. Parada, he can express what transpired. I believe he worked hard on this. And then, of course, Gina, can you tell us from your point of view how it all, if we achieve that goal? And if so, can you show us in this proposed changes? So, Mr. Parada, can you tell us, you know what the issue that we were concerned about, and I believe we, in the consensus of the committee, said, you see a problem, I think we can find a solution together. And I think, Mr. Parada, do you have a proposed solution, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for this evening, and thank you for your input. What you provided directly and indirectly through Gina, we were able to incorporate pretty much everything that you sought in the contract in order to make it so that the city would be able to defer the cost of charging the mattress to the individual, and that would be borne by the city through this special funding, utilizing the $250,000 annually. We were able to move some of that money into year two, $100,000, and $150,000 is now in year three, 250 in the option year of 4, and in the option year of 5. Any excess money that is to be possibly left over because we do not collect enough mattresses, that will help defray the cost of disposing of mattresses that are not recyclable, which will occur from time to time. So it is a 3-year contract instead of a 2-year with an extension for years 4 and 5. The city still receives $750,000 back, with 100 coming back in year 2 on January 1st of 2022, 150 coming back in July 2022, start of year 3, 250 coming in year 4, and 250 coming in year 5, if we so choose to exercise those options under the new administration.
Right. So, Mr. Parada, and correct me if I'm wrong, the future council, future mayor in their first year will have the ability to decide whether or not to extend it or not, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So that issue of binding a future council, future mayor is not relevant at this time, correct? We're good with that. Great, thanks. Gina Costa, Ms. Costa, can you just tell us from your point of view how this proposal is, how this proposal works, or the changes?
In year 2, and by that January, the city needs to set up a separate fund. In the contract, it's called a quote unquote mattress fund. And as the costs come in for the constituents being billed at $26 from Waste Management will get reimbursed from that fund. So no cost to the constituent. The balance of each year will then go to Rhode Island Resource Recovery to reduce the cost of the mattress fees there.
Right. So we end up potentially addressing two issues of funding. One, of course, money that gets generated from the constituent if they're looking to remove a mattress. That will be then defrayed by this fund. And then, of course, any excess will be utilized for the cost of the city's disposal fees, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Mancini, are you there, sir? All right. So, Ms. Costa, have you coordinated with the administration to make sure this mattress kind of fund does get set up so that the internal accounting mechanism occurs? Ms. Severa, are you aware of that? You need to unmute yourself, please.
One second.
Yes.
So, are you, as finance director, are you working with the internal audit to create that fund so that money can go there and then you can charge down from it for those two
Yes.
purposes? One, to defer the constituent cost, and then also excess will pay off the disposal fee that the city has to pay for mattresses. Is that correct?
Yes, finance will work with the internal auditor to set that up.
So that's a linchpin, okay. Internal auditor, are you going to work with them to make sure that occurs?
Yes, sir. I will.
Okay, great. And then I'd asked my, I know Councilman Taylor has a question before that. I asked my colleagues if you take a look at, I gather is this the supplement or is this a substitute? Is that right? If you all go to the screen, I guess, look to your substitute. When it's a substitute, item 4, the entire 4, or just, or is it add?
It's in the miscellaneous pricing. It's section B on this one. I'm not labeled A, B, C, and D.
Okay, so we're gonna do, if I may add, the committee, I believe you have it, we're looking to substitute item 4 for 4A.
So moved.
Motion by Vice Chair, do I have a second?
Second.
Councilman Taylor, discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr.
Madam,
Chair,
thank you. Ms. Costa, you have a question?
There is a technical correction in the contract that I just want to bring to Leo's attention.
Okay. Yes, of course, this is the time to do it.
In each of the years, when they have the rates per month, that third year should no longer say extension year. It is part of the contract already.
Thank you. I will get them to correct that.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to just reference, if everybody looks, my council colleagues, if you look in section D of the substitute, and it begins with almost the last, it's a big paragraph, but look for the word additional, and it describes what's going to happen with the money. And it says additionally, as of January 1st, 2022, for the remaining term of the agreement, should the agreement be extended for 2 full years, described in section 1, WMRI shall charge the fee associated with the mattress and box spring collection against the mattress fund. So Mr. Mancini, Mr. Savelli, that's the fund you have to create, and not to the residents requesting collection service, and any money remaining in the mattress fund at the end of each contract year shall be remitted to the city to offset its cost for handling and disposing of mattresses and box springs. So the contract itself calls it out, and you need to put that together. Okay?
We will.
Thank you. Councilman Taylor? Sir?
Yeah, Chairman, couple of questions. So it's a 3-year deal, and all 3 years it would include mattresses, or only year 2 and 3?
Mr. Parada, or Gina, do you want to explain? Because we're kind of halfway in the first year, I think, isn't it? Is that what it is?
Yes, I believe there was originally, the original contract had years 3, 4, and 5. But since you wanted year 3 guaranteed, we pulled up the reimbursement of the $250, or the, what do you want to call it? The extra money there to come in year 2. So the payment of the mattress program can start earlier.
So will we be able to start the mattress program at the beginning of the new year? I guess that's the question.
It's going to start beginning of 22. Originally, it would have started in fiscal year 23, but we got to bring it up 6 months earlier.
I just lost everybody.
So as of July 1st, 2022, people can start putting their mattresses out? Is that
January
correct?
1st, 2022.
January 1st, 22. Okay.
They still have to follow the same rules. They still have to call Waste Management. They just don't have to pay the $26.
Okay. And are we going to, as a city, advertise that at that point in time? Is that included, the fees for advertising that, or, is that going to cost anything to let people know? So, because how I'm looking at it then, Leo, after January 1st, 2022, the Mattress Depot won't be open on Saturdays. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, I can't say the Mattress Depot won't be open because I'm sure that will have to be phased out. But there is money in the contract that the city receives from Waste Management to be used in various public education programs. So there's $30,000 allocated in the contract annually, and we can use some of those funds to help promote the new mattress program starting for January 1, 2022. I'm sure we can do that prior to that date to get people aware of the new system. And obviously, if the goal is to minimize the amount of mattresses that come to the depot, all the better.
And is there going to be, I guess my next question would be, if you don't mind, Chairman, is there a minimum? Okay, so it's a 3-decker house on the west end, X, Y, and Z Linwood Avenue. Are they going to be able to, put out 2 mattresses, 4 mattresses, 6 mattresses?
Councilman, I think you're getting into the actual particulars right now, and this is going to give us time to actually create the program, because we also have to be careful that, you want to be able to give everybody an opportunity. You don't want someone who owns you want to have it limited to particular types of, I presume, multifamilies up to certain numbers, because all of a sudden you'll have the Johnson & Wales dormitory, drop off 400 mattresses in the front step there, you know what I'm saying? So,
Right, no,
I
no,
think-
my question kind of works with the mattress depot. You can only bring
Yeah, I know.
2 per address. But I
know what I'm
didn't
saying.
know,
What I'm saying is that for the idea to defer the cost to the constituents, I think we have to now work out those steps, meaning like, what is the program gonna look like? How do we make sure everybody has at least an opportunity to have at least one of their mattresses disposed? Not everybody's disposing of mattresses every year. So I think those particulars have to be ironed out. What I'm saying is I would look towards that maybe, what you can do is, since you've done, I hate to tell you, you become kind of like this, an authority of this process. So I would look towards maybe the next few weeks, then maybe you can work with Mr. Parada, you guys can start putting together what the program should look like and how it all can play out for everybody. So it's fair. Does that make sense?
yes, it does.
You know, because we haven't got into that. Right now, we were just trying to utilize the contract in front of us and try to solve a problem. So I would ask if that's okay. So it's because there's only so much time right now on the committee. If you could work, Ms. Prada, would you work with Councilman Taylor and work out the fine tuning of that? And then you can come back in a few weeks and tell us what the program's gonna look like for all of us?
Sure, I'd be happy to work with.
You do that?
Anybody else, for that matter.
Councilman Taylor, would you be willing to work with Mr. Prada to do that?
Definitely.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other questions on this matter, Councilman
Nope,
Taylor?
that's it. Let me take my hand down.
Ms. Costa, is there anything else we need to be aware of?
No, sir. That's all that I have.
All right. So, I guess what I do is, Mr. Prada, what I would ask is that the committee, if we could, I guess, make a motion to approve as substitute, approve as substitute number 4? Approve? Item number 4 as substitute? But also with the caveat that Mr. Prada, that you would come back in a few weeks, working with Councilman Taylor to, tell us how the program would work.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair
Second.
makes that motion. Second by Councilman Taylor. Mr. Prada, will we be able to see you in a few weeks to talk about the program?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I want to just take a moment to thank my committee, Ms. Costa, the administration. I think we've found a good solution to a particular problem, and hopefully it'll benefit all our constituents in the future. So I want to thank you all. All right? Thank you, Mr. Parada.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
I echo that also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parada.
All right, and we'll keep rolling. Now, I guess the next item on the docket. Were we all set? We approved that one? Oh, good, right? Next item, Madam Clerk.
Discussion relative to the current real-time status of the 2019, 2020, and 2020 to 21 budgets, including but not limited to revenue and expenditures. The following have been invited: Lawrence J. Mancini, Chief Financial Officer; Sarah Silveria, Director of Finance.
So, as you know, Mr. Mancini, I've asked you to come before the committee this evening to give us some more real-time updates on the city's status of the past budget and the present budget. I'm sure my council colleagues have heard. I mean, I've been talking about it, and I will continue to speak about it. As you know, recently, unemployment, we're the second highest unemployment in the nation this time in Rhode Island. Although Congress, whoever wins, whatever they put together as a temporary Band-Aid for additional unemployment or continued unemployment, the reality is that sooner or later, those types of Band-Aids will not exist come next year or later in the year, and in which real-time unemployment will actually set in. One of the hottest hit sectors was the service sector, restaurants and bars and hotels and et cetera. And at this time, and also the travel industry. As we know, downtown continues as a did my review again. Downtown continues to have, continued to hemorrhage. More restaurants are closing, more bars are closing, events are not happening, and it doesn't look like there's gonna be much coming soon. Those are some grim realities. So on that end, we also trying to keep the city moving forward, but we also have to be judicious in our budgeting and how we handle this budget. I just read the other day recently, even Walt Disney is going to be laying off tens of thousands of folks. I think it's something like 38,000. So, it's getting real, and I think we need to do everything we can now to prepare for what's the financial impact that's going to happen next year and the upcoming years. And right now, we're all in this kind of like temporary, fictitious economic bubble at this point. You get the confluence of the presidential election, and you get all the parties in Washington just trying to keep everything feeling good and keeping all the Band-Aids on it. But we all know it doesn't matter how it's going to play out come November, come January of next year, there will be a issue. And if I may say, it's reminiscent of the presidential election of McCain and Obama, as Bush II was leaving office, and the economic, in October of that year, it was an election year, if you remember, that economic tsunami was coming, and it was kind of like, well, it's really not here yet. But then once the new president, in that case President Obama, got sworn in, he was handed a serious financial problem, and then we all were scrambling. No matter who wins come January, it's going to be probably in that same similar position, if not greater. So what I asked Mr. Mancini to do is to give us an update, first of all, on the very simple where we are on what's the status of the past budget, last fiscal year, what monies are still owed, and we still carrying on the books as hopefuls, right? What payments have we not made, whether it's bond money or pension money or any kind of contract money. Also, where we are on the present fiscal year, where we are on the revenue coming in, not just the tax revenue, the other revenue sources, from the pilot, from the universities, from, of course, your hotel and meal tax, how that's playing out, and then, of course, what's happening in the number of employees. Has employment gone down? Have we had a lot of people retire in different departments and units? If so, which ones? So we're trying to get a real understanding. So let's begin with the last fiscal year. Just give us some numbers and stats there, and then let's roll into the present fiscal year. Because we know we're now in October, and we're now, almost basically a quarter into this present fiscal year, which of course gives us great concern. So, Mr. Mancini, want to tell us where we are right now with that, and then I think Ms. Costa has some questions as we go along. Mr. Mancini, could you tell us the past fiscal year first, where we are?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good evening once again, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you information for both FY20 and FY21. So, Mr. Chairman, last week as we began this discussion, you had asked us to provide information in those two budget years. I'll start with the FY20. We have just completed most of the preliminary work that's necessary to submit the final balances to our outside auditors. And at this time, we are confident that with due respect to the sources of revenue other than state pilot, which is a carry back to the prior year, as you know, and this is a continuing discussion associated with continuing budget authority, the state, as of August 31st, given state statute, is now required to pay the municipalities in Rhode Island 1/12 per month of any continuing authority appropriation. And so in the case of the pilot, working off a $34 million appropriation, they have in fact made 3 consecutive payments equal to 1/12. That revenue to the city now equals $8.5 million for the months of July, August, and September. So while we have already received it, it's revenue that's carried back to the prior year. We have recently received an opinion from the city's outside auditors that we would be permissible to carry the state pilot revenue as an account receivable, if you will. And so if we will, we'll carry that as a receivable until we learn otherwise. As I said last week in my remarks, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe we'll have that information of any degree of certainty until the General Assembly returns to their work and their session. And as I understand, and I think you know this as well, that will not occur any time before the election. It could occur in the month of November. Perhaps more than likely it will happen in December, but I do believe it will happen before the next General Assembly is convened. With that, we are receiving $2.8 million a month approximately, which is the 1/12 of the $34 million pilot appropriation that was expected to be appropriate and paid in full by July 15th. Had that been paid, Mr. Chairman, we would have taken that revenue and we would have done as we have done in each of the last several years, and we would have used it to extinguish dollar for dollar the amount that we would need to complete the pension obligation. At this time, the pension obligation with the receipt of those 3 monthly payments equal to 1/12 of the $34 million pilot appropriation, equaling $2.8 million a month, has totaled $8.5 million. Each of those payments were placed and put towards the FY20 pension obligation. That balance is now down to $23,928,000. It started out at $30,500,000 at June 30. Beyond pilot, we believe that if the pilot is received in its entirety, the city will finish in a balanced budget position, which really includes full payment to the rainy day fund of equal to $3.6 million. So we should end up in that position. And while that sounds somewhat at this point uncertain, I'm only working off the information that I can, and I have cleared this opinion from the outside auditors that we are allowed to record that as a receivable. I have shared that with the state's Auditor General, Mr. Hoyle, and they are aware of that opinion. And in a meeting last week, one of our continuing regular monthly meetings, they received that information and they found no rebuttal to that. So we have taken those steps to check with our outside auditor. They will permit us to carry that as a receivable. What that would really mean, Mr. Chairman, is that if the state should in fact approve 100% of the pilot appropriation, but for some reason decides to continue to pay it in installments because of cash flow, for certain that receivable, because it's not truly a tax, would be permissible to be carried on the city's books as an outstanding receivable, and we would be able to include that as part of the year-end audit that's due to be closed out by December 31. That's an important consideration in the world of accounting. I think I've shared that with your consultant, Mr. Almonte, himself a former Auditor General, and I'm happy to report at least on the accounting side of that. From a cash flow standpoint, Mr. Chairman, we have finished up the year. We have small balances owed to us in the local pilot. It remains outstanding is the amount that was due us from Lifespan. That amount of $400,000 is due. All other payments from the local pilots, hospitals, and educational institutions have been paid in full and have been fully satisfied from the last time we met and discussed this discussion. And then along the various budgetary line items, there have been some budget surpluses and budget deficits, all together taken into consideration, as I reported from my opening remarks, leading to what we hope to be a balanced budget contingent upon mostly the recognition of what happens with the state pilot appropriation when the state General Assembly does get back into session. We have shared that report for June 3rd at the July 25th reporting deadline, and we continue to update that regularly, including giving out the trial balances to the city's outside auditors. Their work has already begun, the field work, and they will continue to opine on the accounting records for FY20. That basically completes that conversation, Mr. Chairman. I will say some of the better attributes of the FY20 year was that we actually collected 1% greater in tax revenue than had been budgeted. For FY20, we had expected to collect $337,218,000 in real, tangible, and motor vehicle taxes. We actually collected $339,708,000. We collected 2.4 million greater, and despite the hardship of COVID-19, and despite the fact that the city was able to allow for hardship relief by not charging any interest or penalty during the fourth quarter did come through, and it did come in better than expected, I might say, and that included not holding the tax sale in the fourth quarter, but it was in fact held in August, which fell into the 60-day period, and that also helped out with 60-day revenues. So on the tax standpoint, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I can say that the integrity of the tax levy and the collections thereon were still solid and still reliable. That paves the way to the, yeah.
What were the tax was good in that sense, but what were were there any other revenue sources, and any shortfalls in those other revenue sources?
So
For example,
by category.
I understand for accounting measures, you guys have this accounting thing that they've given you a pass until to see what happens, but the actual money coming in for the end of 2020, any shortfalls in money owed to the city, and if so, what are they specifically, and what are the amounts? We can start off with the last pilot money from the state, right? We still had $28 million waiting for that from the state? Is it 28 million? Is that what it was?
We expected 34 million, and they've paid us 8.5, so we are owed 25.5.
Yeah, but isn't 8.5 for this present fiscal year, not for last year, I'm saying?
No.
Right, so they didn't pay us. They didn't pay us for last fiscal year. I know you're using the money they're giving today, in theory, to charge off on what they owed for last fiscal year. I get that accounting measure, but that's an accounting aspect. That's what you do for accounting, for a numbers thing. But the reality is, how much money did the state? What was the shortfall that the state? What was the shortfall from the state from last fiscal year? Because we did not get X amount, right? We didn't get 34 million from it, right? And now we're charging off these other payments of the upcoming fiscal year and charging down that number, right?
If you would allow me, Mr. Chairman, you're partially right, with due respect. It is not an accounting exercise as much as it is a budgetary exercise, and it's been that way for 3 decades.
No, that's fair enough.
Let me take you and the committee back in history. During the Kachiri administration, the state was having difficult budget conditions. The city of Providence and 5 other municipalities, Tuckett, Cranston, Central Falls, I believe Woonsocket, and East Providence, agreed that they would delay the receipt of their pilot appropriation, general revenue sharing, until the state was positioned to do so sometime in their new budget year, when it should have been paid at June 30, the end of the current fiscal year. With that said, those municipalities, Providence included, and Providence the largest share, dutifully complied with that, and that has become histrionic. Ever since then, it's been the same thing. What is expected by and before June 30 cannot and is not paid by the state until they appropriate their new year, in every year. Nothing to do with COVID. If the General Assembly adopts a budget in every year, let's go back before COVID, as expected by June 30, that budget adoption cannot commence until July 1, and the cash flow and appropriations that they make to municipalities under the pilot program does not begin until, let's just say, 2 weeks into the new year. That money is relied upon and expected by the municipality, in this case Providence, previously. So it is both an accounting and a budgetary activity, and that hasn't changed. So all I'm saying is,
I understand that. What I'm saying though is, come June of this year, the state did not appropriate that money that they owed us for the previous fiscal year, correct?
Well, they had not adopted the budget.
Right,
they haven't adopted a budget.
I know that. I recognize I understand that. What I'm saying is,
so what
I'm saying is that the amount the state was, what was the amount the state was supposed to appropriate to the city if everything was fine? What was the number?
34 million. 34 million and some round dollars,
34 million. And that's got to do with the state saying, you know, basically, we don't have we want to be able to use future dollars to pay for past debt, because that's what that's about. It's like, basically, because the state's saying, I don't got 34 million in my present fiscal year, I'm gonna get it. So they're always chasing. It's a Peter to Paul principle. I get why they could chase. I understand why the state did it, and I understand why the city's in it. Like I said all the time. The city's a city that has basically, for sake of conversation, 14, 15 months of bills with 12 months of revenue. We're always waiting for next year money to pay for past. I get that, and that's fine. I'm not gonna belabor that. But at this point in time, the state was owing us X, and so far, they paid 8 in theory of that 34 you said?
What was expected to be appropriated had the General Assembly accepted the governor's proposed budget would have been 34 million.
Can't do that. So right now, the state is a late payer to the city. That's what I'm just saying, right? State's a late payee to the state. Like they owe us money.
This city and every other city in Rhode Island that has appropriation.
I'm fine. Don't get me wrong, Mr. Mr. I do care about the other cities. I'm just talking about the city of Providence. Right now, the state of Rhode Island is a late payee to the city of Providence. Correct? That's a fact. Okay. Now
it is, but Mr. Chairman, I want to be clear. They're working off of what's known as a continuing authority. Therefore,
I know. It's fine. I don't want to get. I get all that. I get all that stuff. Then let's next up. At the end of last fiscal year, any shortfalls, and what was the shortfall in meal tax, hotel tax, and any of the revenues and permit fees and stuff? Let's talk about that. What are those shortfalls, if any, the last fiscal year? Do we have a tally of them now?
I do. So, meals and beverage was off by 1.1 million. The bulk of that occurring in the fourth quarter of last year. Mm-hmm. Hotel tax or room tax was off by 470,000 on an anticipated budget of 1.8 million. So roughly 20%, just over 20%. Again, the bulk of that in the fourth quarter. I think both of those areas would have been at budget had there not been restrictions associated with social distancing and in fact the closure of businesses for the most of the fourth quarter, particularly in the area of hotels and meals and beverage.
What about permits? What about licenses and permits?
So in the area of licenses and permits, last year we were expected to receive in the area of licensing. We had a budget of $1,549,000. We received $1,505,000, off by $43,000. That's fair to say that the bulk of our licensing revenue is collected in quarters 1, 2, and 3. So no real diminishment in the fourth quarter. Maybe some sidewalk cafe revenue, maybe some gasoline station permit revenue may have seen some reduction, but overall satisfied that in licensing, that section of licensing basically came within budget. In the area of inspection and permit fees, while the budget was set at $7.5 million, we did collect $6.2 million. That budget was off by $1.3 million. I will admit that while the Department of Inspection Standards did continue to work through the pandemic through remote means, including doing camera inspections, some of the projects that was expected to start were delayed or did not come through to fruition, and that was reflective of that reduction in revenue.
What about red light and speed cameras?
Yeah, so in the area of all fines and forfeiture, which included that, because due to the closure of the court, I've testified on previous occasions that I believe 61 or 65% of our municipal court revenue is revenue that is paid in person as a matter of preference rather than paying through the mail. That had a major impact during the fourth quarter. Of the approximately $5 million of revenue that was expected in the budget, we received 2.9, almost $3 million. There was a $2 million loss of revenue in that area. Again, I think more than half of that was associated with the fourth quarter.
Is that going to do with red light and speed cameras? Or just
that was red light. That was red light. Speed camera, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I have that right. I know that the public safety budget, which is where speed cameras is located, and other revenues, public safety saw a budget reduction of almost $1 million, and I would think the bulk of that was a speed zone camera.
And in those two contracts, is there any type of, I probably look toward the law department, Clearly, the red lights became as if it's gone down. Is there any type of force majeure or anything like that, Mr. Cheverini, which gives the city the ability not to have to pay for the fees of the red light company? Mr. Cheverini? You're muted. All right. Mr. Mancini, do you know of any of that?
So, Mr. Chairman, this discussion is a discussion I believe that you have brought to the table several months ago in the early days of business closure, both in the economy and in government. And I believe the solicitor himself, Solicitor Dana, opined that almost in every case there was not a clause or a condition that allowed for force majeure conditions that would allow us to break those contracts. And I believe we relied on that opinion as well.
Okay. Well, that's something I think we have to look to in the future then, don't we? To make sure the contracts have that. That's usually a standard practice clause.
Yeah.
I'd ask,
so, Mr. Chairman, I can give you some additional information.
One second. When City Solicitor comes back on, Mr. Clerk, can you just reference him to be able to report to us on that for next finance meeting? Mr. Mancini?
So, again,
Mr. Chair, I'm here. I will pass that on to the solicitor, and we will report back.
Yeah, I'd like to have an answer for my next finance meeting. What is the status of all those types of contracts? We talked about it, and we haven't heard anything back yet.
I certainly will. Okay.
Let the record reflect that Councilman Goncalves is present and President Pro Tem Correa is present.
So noted.
Thank you. Mr. Mancini, now rolling into the first quarter of the new fiscal year, what's the status of where we are with building permits, licenses, hotel, all those kinds of things? What's that revenue looking like? Or revenue?
So, yeah, just a second, Mr. Chairman. So, if you will, I need my notes. Thank you.
No problem.
My apologies, Mr. Chairman. Give me 1 second. I'm looking for my notes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for the period that ended August 31st, with a report due September 15th, as provided by the Finance Department, we are, due to the uncertainty of projection, because the models that are used for projection are predicated on various attributes. Not all of the revenue is received pinpoint accurately on a quarterly or monthly basis. As an example, distressed cities is not paid until October, and the balance of that is then paid in the month of March, basically the first week in April. That revenue is generally dedicated for the reimbursement of bond indebtedness. So things of that type have not yet occurred, or they don't occur on a scheduled monthly, quarterly basis. I can tell you that starting with taxes, which I remind the committee, for the sake of that conversation, I know you have some new members, Mr. Chairman, who have not sat through these proceedings, and certainly we're not part of the budget discussions as yet, but for the sake of that discussion, taxes continues to be 2/3 of the city's budgeted revenue. On a budget that was submitted for May 1 as proposed, and has not yet been adopted, and I'm sure will change, that budget was submitted at $506,060,000. Taxes represented $333 million of that, or roughly 2/3. I started with these remarks last week, Mr. Chairman, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to expand a little further, a little deeper on our tax revenue. Back in June and through the summer months, whenever testimony was asked, we had indicated that for purposes of cash flow, more importantly than budget, because we were working on continuing authority, we were working in many ways on the unknown, and we were still devising and determining best efforts and best practices on budget reductions and revenue projections. We held true that tax revenue would continue to be the mainstay of cash flow to provide stability to city government. I'm proud to say once again that those tax revenues mirrored or came out better than what is expected in the first quarter each and every year. Generally, the first quarter is the largest collection percentage of all the 4 quarters in the city's tax levy. This year, that first quarter generated 35% tax collection, close to 118 million against the 333 million. So what was expected absolutely came in at 118 million. When I had did my earlier version of projection under what I called a spend essential only cash flow, I have provided testimony to this committee, and I have provided documentation to the city treasurer and the internal auditor, I believe back in July, that made a determination of how much cash discretion would be available by the time we reached September 30th, the start of the second quarter, which, incidentally, Mr. Chairman, we just began the second quarter tax collection. Back then, I had indicated that all things considered, and may I remind the committee again that, as we know, 92% of the city's budget is non-discretionary, based on wages, medical, pension, debt service, school appropriation, and minimal essential spending on such things as fuel, heat, light, and power. 92% of the city's budget is non-discretionary in every year. That remaining 8%, or roughly 40 million, even within that, only half of that can be considered somewhat discretionary. But I say that because we did a minimum essential spend only, contractually obligated spend only, and I had determined that based on the projection of cash, only at 30% tax collections, which would have brought in 100 million, that we thought we would have cash sufficiency to cover us all the way through the second pay period in October, which is October 16th, and we would have honored all of our obligations that were necessary to obligate, including debt service, school appropriation each and every month, wages, medical, operation expenses, etc., and probably would have close to $15 million of a cash balance remaining to make a determination on should we or should we not make any payment to the pension plan. And we did so, and we utilized what we thought at that time best judgment by taking $10 million and utilizing that for a pension payment for the new year, saving us approximately $700,000 in pension interest already for the new year. That was predicated on only taxes and no reliance upon outside revenue, departmental revenue, transfer revenue, or pilot revenue, and it was paid through the first quarter without collecting yet $1 in the second quarter. I'm pleased to say that today.
Yep. You mentioned, but for last fiscal year, there was what, a $34 million pension payment owed that we needed to do for the last fiscal year. Is that correct?
30 million, 30,500,000, with expectation that we would receive 34 million in pilot at one shot, and we would have eliminated
30 million. So it's 30 million. So the usual way is at the end of last fiscal year, there was a $30.5 million pension payment owed to the city to the pension account.
That's
and then
correct.
And then when the new fiscal year gets adopted by the state, which is traditionally done, the state releases 34 million, in which goes
That is correct.
to utilize, in theory, to back pay that 30.5.
Absolutely.
And then we have
Absolutely.
about, I don't know, we have about, what is it, 3.5 to do something else with. At that
That's
moment
correct.
in time, we didn't make that payment. Now, fast forward, they said the state has given us $8 million. Is that correct?
8.5 million.
Did we use that money and put it towards that pension payment?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Dollar for dollar and penny for penny. And Mr. Chairman, the finance team had committed that early on to this committee, and we have informed your treasurer and internal auditor. And in fact, we've informed the Auditor General and Division of Municipal Finance that every penny we took in on the pilot would be dedicated to pension. And we,
So
and that, in fact,
that means there's still about, was it 22.5?
23.9 million.
23.9 million still owed to the pension system for last fiscal year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That's correct. Okay.
That is correct.
Okay. Just one moment. Councilman Taylor, are you there, sir? Okay. Okay. Councilman Taylor, are you there? Does that answer your question?
Yes, that does answer my question. Thank you, Chairman.
So that's where we are right now. So we're still looking for 23 point, what was it, Mr. Mancini?
23,928,000 and some dollars.
Now,
23.9.
for this, also now for these months, the first quarter of this year,
Yes,
there's normally money owed to the pension account also, isn't there?
that's correct.
So has that money been paid, or is that money now on top, it's just being compounded onto the 23 point?
No, so Mr.
Get my
Chair,
point?
I
Do
do.
we make our?
I do.
So can you explain that for us, please?
I will, be glad to. Thank you very much. I always appreciate that opportunity, Mr. Chairman. So for the new year, the practice that we have established in concert with Finance and Treasury, and I believe the Internal Auditor is aware of it as well, is that as best as we can, as soon as we can, as cash permits, and when cash is more abundant, and I say that because it has been abundant in prior years, particularly in the early part of the year, we have collaboratively paid what we believe we could afford. In many years, the last 3 or 4, it's been 10 and 20 million, 10 plus 20 million, 30 million, as early as we can on that current year's obligation, which is, Mr. Chairman, I must do this for the benefit of the committee. The pension payment is calculated as if no payment is made until June 30. Therefore, any payment made earlier results in a discount of the entire payment, ergo in interest, pension interest savings. We have done that to better manage cash flow. Along with that, school and water pay theirs as they go monthly. So those funds are going in and they're going right to the trustee. And then whatever we can afford to pay, in the last few years, we were paying upwards of 20 and 30 million as early as August, and then 2 million a month for the first 6 months of the year. Then we would pause to make sure that cash flow could align itself with expenditures, because as I said earlier in my remarks, not all revenue and not all expenditures arrive pinpoint accurately month by month or quarter by quarter. Some of them are just payable. Like I said, housing aid comes in a small piece in October and the remainder in March. We use that for debt service.
So let's talk about that. I understand what happened in the past couple of years. So now presently right now.
Because it's recent past. It's recent past. That's why I'm saying it.
So right now, the pension would be owed, it's still owed 23 point some odd millions, right?
That's correct.
And is there any interest on that money at this time?
There is.
Okay. And what is it, what's the interest? Interest per day, whatever. Is it per day, per week? How does it go?
So it's 8% per year, or roughly $5,000 a day.
$5,000 a day? Okay.
That's right, on that balance. But I want to remind the committee that we had already been working off a $2.3 million pension interest savings from having made pension payments early in the year last year.
I understand.
Let me finish. That would have allowed us to make a smaller payment. So any interest that we're yielding back, because there was no way that under any condition we could make a full payment by June 30. And when pandemic and no state appropriation and no pilot money coming in, therefore, where will we get the cash to do that? The bottom line is, yes, we're yielding interest daily, but we also save interest. Before this is said and done, by the time the General Assembly gets back into session, I firmly believe that we'll be on that path to make the full payment.
So how many days has it been? The $5,000 times how many days?
Well, so it's,
60
I believe
days?
it's 90 days at September, 90 days at September 30th. Give me a second, I'll do my math. It's 92 days at September 30th times, what was, it started out at 24 million, but then of course you're gonna subtract the payments that were made interveningly, but at 30 million times 0.08 divided by 365 times 90 days. So perhaps close to 600,000 in interest, because the clock is ticking.
All right. So.
And by the way, Mr. Chairman, that in itself is highly unusual. And I must say for the record, not to distort this, and I don't want members to think differently, we would never have let a pension balance go beyond the due date of June 30, and the weeks that follow, had the state been able to provide us immediately the cash that was expected. So unfortunately, this is one of the side effects of the pandemic and the unappropriate, and the fact that the General Assembly has not appropriated.
We recognize, of course, we wouldn't have done that. The issue is that what we're trying to make sure on the Finance Committee is that there's full understanding, full disclosure for everybody to understand.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
We are not in normal times.
No doubt.
And not in normal times, And there are serious financial ramifications occurring right now, today, as we speak. And although right now everybody is in somewhat of a political vacuum bubble right now, rolling into, as I mentioned earlier, and like I said, it's reminiscent for me, and I remember being here in the Finance Committee talking about the same thing when in October, when we had the credit default swap and the real estate market dropping out, and you had an outgoing president, and you had a presidential election, and everybody was in this kind of little bubble, open, and Congress was passing emergency money, but then come January, the new president was handed a major financial problem, because we all were, those months running up to January, we were in this temporary political financial bubble. It's artificial, and what I'm doing here is what I tried to do then, which is express to my colleagues and the committee members and council members that we are in an artificial financial bubble right now. It's not by our own design, it's by other powers that we have no control over. And this artificial bubble, it will burst and pop come January. So that's the reason why we're having this constant conversation about the city's finances and where we are and what are we doing today. Because the sense of urgency is not there. It's no different than when I listen about when I hear the previous administration talk about how the pension system was saved under their stewardship, and we all know it wasn't. And there's no financial urgency. There's no urgency of how to address the pension system. There's no urgency to address the financial situation in the city. And we're all talking about all these other issues, which are valid. The health issue is serious, the social issue is serious, but the financial issue in the city itself has really taken a back seat to those two issues, at least in the city proper. Because no one's talking about the city's financial issues, except this committee about city. Everybody's talking about the social issues in the city and the health issues in the city, but the financial has been taking a huge backseat. So what we're trying to make sure, and my job is to make sure as chair of this committee, that all my committee members and council colleagues have full understanding and disclosure, getting a wide screen of what's going on. So I wanted to also get a sense, Mr. Mancini, knowing now that the first quarter is done, knowing that what is the normal, how much do we allocate in theory? We were thinking we were going to get in revenue for the beverage and hotel and all those elements, because permits, building permits, et cetera, Our permits up, well, before I do that, taxes. My question to you is, when it comes to taxes, I understand the first quarter usually is a little bit easier, and that's the bulk one, because that's a lot of the escrow money. So we're in good shape there. I know there was a conversation about a tax sale last fiscal year, correct, Mr. Mancini?
Correct.
Okay. So is that amount of delinquent taxes growing? So when you do your next tax sale, I guess will it be even larger? Like, are we seeing any patterns of people not able
No.
to
So,
pay
Mr. Chairman, if you allow,
house tax? Let me ask
you
you
would
that
allow
question,
me-
then I ask you for the other revenues. Mr. Mancini?
if you would allow me to take your several questions one at a time and unpack them, and I mean that with all due respect, may I just say for the record, because it's important for the work that I do and my team, while there is a active discussion about the social impact of COVID-19, I can assure you that the finance team and the administration daily monitors the finances of the city. The city continues to run, and while we see diminished revenue, Mr. Chairman, it's important to know that we are obliged to inform this committee that we watch those finances every single day. What you worry about, Mr. Chairman, I worry about as well. I mean that with all the sincerity in the world. Let me give you some cause to take that worry away. With the first quarter does not necessarily mean that the mortgage companies pay their escrow accounts in full. While that was true at one time, because of the interest requirement to be paid on those funds, they now pay them steadily, just like every other taxpayer. They pay them quarterly. Why is the first quarter the quarter that generates the greatest amount? Because the bill arrives, the person sees it, and sometimes they just want to get rid of it. God bless them, those that do that. Sometimes in the motor vehicle category, the bill is an annoyance. They don't want to write out 4 coupons. I'm paying it in full. And then there are those that just pay faithfully in the first quarter. That's a tradition and a trend that I haven't seen different in 10 years. But I'm pleased to say from the fourth quarter, the behavior of taxpayers did not change despite COVID-19 conditions on hardship, whether they were enhanced by pandemic unemployment insurance benefits, stimulus payments. While we thought at one time, myself included, there would be a lag in collection upwards of $5 million. That lag was dissipated and was in fact replaced with a higher collection. The tax sale. Let me just talk about the tax sale for a minute, Mr. Chairman. While the tax sale was postponed on technicalities, it is not meant to be punitive. The tax sale is an instrument of collection that is allowed by law, not only city ordinance, but by state law. It is one of the several tools that the collector or his or her designee utilizes to be faithful to the city taxpayers in total to collect every dollar through the city. When a tax levy is adopted by this city council, it is our obligation to collect those funds in any way that we have to, in doing it with respect of taxpayers. Do they allow for specific conditions? Yes. Does the collector enter into payment agreements? Yes. Let me just share some statistics with Chen. This is very important. While the tax sale dollars started out in February, originally 90 days prior to a May 14th scheduled tax sale, that list was about 600 properties with about $5 million of taxes owed. Through the course of the 90-day warning to the 40-day warning, it dropped in half. From the 40-day to the 20-day, it dropped in half again. By the time the due date came for May 14th and was postponed, kicked over into August, that list was down to $1.2 million, 35 properties, only 35 properties of 152 properties were owner-occupied properties. And I think, from my understanding, 2/3 of them were habitual delinquent taxpayers. With all due respect to those taxpayers, 2/3 of them had this problem each and every year. So it wasn't brought on by COVID. It wasn't brought on by some.
I understand.
So, but where I'm going with that,
that's good. That's good news. We only got so much time. I'm going to the next level. I need to know where are we now with where are we with the other revenue sources of meal and beverage? Because I understand the good news. I hear the good news in taxes. That's great. But the state's not paying its pilot. And what's going on now that when you walk downtown and every venue is practically closed, hotels and et cetera, where are we with this present first quarter of those revenues, building permits, licenses, and et cetera, this first quarter? And then I presume we can honestly put together what the trend is going to be like for the rest of the second quarter of this fiscal year. So can you tell me where we are on that? We're in October, so we should have a good handle of meal and beverage. What did we collect and what we were expecting to collect?
So, Mr. Chairman, meals and beverage and hotels, those have a natural 60-day lag of reporting from the State Department of Revenue. Mm-hmm. So technically, the July and August revenues were not known to us at August 31st. They only became available to us in the month of September. From our initial preliminary look at that, it appears that while the meals were expected to be close to $600,000 for those 2 months, they came in at nearly half that amount, maybe a little bit greater than that. And that was expected. Bear in mind, most return to restaurant establishment venues did not commence until sometime after the 4th of July weekend.
Let's talk numbers. So meal and beverage was cut in half for those 2 months.
Yep.
Okay. And what about hotel?
Hotels was virtually non-existent.
Zero.
Hotels.
What do we normally expect for that in those months?
Well, the hotel budget is roughly about $2.2 million a year, based on some state information, and quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, we probably would have seen in the high months of July and August, again, that report not yet ready because we only reported through August 31st to the internal auditor last week. Based on information, it was not even yet payable to the city from the state. But I think you'd see, normally you would see about 30% of the budget amount during the summer months. Likewise, because of the natural vacation season, the month, people taking hotel stays, and then it trails off and the rest of it comes in around winter sports, sporting events, et cetera. So while that prediction is not yet available, and we don't know what that will be, what the winter will bring, whether there will be any opportunity for revenue associated with sporting
they've
events.
announced, the Convention and Civic Center announced that they're not gonna have any events until sometime next year anyway, so
Right.
we should be expecting zero on those aspects. What about permits and licenses and building permits? Any new building permits?
Yeah, so building permits continues to have prospect, but there is a lag, and I think that has to do with naturally there were projects. Part of building permits is not just inspections that people ask for to have a building inspection completed. It has to do with new construction or projects, and I think we're seeing intentional delay in project commencement based upon either access to capital or market or just folks that are just concerned about what COVID-19 might mean for new projects. So we're seeing some lag in that. The director
What
of the
about
Department of
recordation, recorder of deed fees? Are we seeing a high end of recording of sales?
We're seeing no diminishment in that area. In fact, we're seeing probably a small peak in the month of July. I think that may have been with due respect to the expression. I think that was due to pent up activity that could not occur regularly before June 29th when the building was not open in its entirety. So recorder of deeds are maintaining fairly good as far as the expected budget recorder of deeds.
Okay. So a couple of follow-up questions. I think Chief Taylor has a follow-up question about, he wants to know what was the projected date of when the 23.9 million was going to be, is to be paid by?
Well, at this point, it'll be paid steadily as we receive the continuing appropriation authority payments of 1/12 each month, 2.8 million. As we get the October payment at October 31, we'll make another 2.8 million. If the General Assembly is not planning on going back into session until at least after the election, let's assume it's sometime in November, probably another payment will be received under continuing authority for the state of 2.8 million. And then I would hope that by the time they complete their session, they'll have a budget adopted before calendar year end, before the commencement of the new General Assembly in January. I still have to hold true to my expectation, Mr. Chairman, that they will in fact honor the pilot program for not just the city of Providence, but every other city that is highly dependent on that. I don't know that, but I'm here to tell you that we expect that we would be in the mix of those decisions as far as state money. So right now, we keep whittling it down by the monthly payments. Every payment that's received from the state goes directly to the pension.
Okay. So a couple of follow-up questions by the internal auditor, then a couple of questions by Chief Taylor. Internal auditor, you have a few questions?
Yes. Larry, I did that presentation and we basically have the same numbers for the revenue shortfalls. At that point, I didn't include the $3.3 million for the 60-day revenue for taxes, which would have given me about a $9.7 million, which is what the report was showing at that time. Can you tell me how we went from that 9.7 in mid-September to 3.6 now? Didn't have anything to do with revenue.
With what?
It doesn't have to do with revenue because our revenue numbers are equal.
Yeah. I don't have that report in front of me, Madam Auditor, but I know that we made some changes in medical based on some medical claims that were still coming in, and I believe while I say that we probably would end at balanced budget, bear in mind that means a $4 million surplus, because that really means that we'll probably end the year with, if all expectations occur with the pilot, we will pay the entire rainy day appropriation, which is 3.7 million. So a balanced budget in the world of finance is really this balanced budget plus the rainy day. So I don't know how much of a difference that really comes out to. I'm sorry, I don't have that.
No, I did include that, but there's something that happened between within 3 weeks that changed the amount of the budget. How much in medical was adjusted, or what was the adjustments for?
I don't have that in front of me. Can Sarah or Crystal provide that?
Sure.
If you have that?
Yep, so, as you know, in July and August, and even into September, we're working through the balance sheet, cleaning up entries, working on 60-day collections for not just taxes, but for fines, for speed camera revenue. We've also, over the past few years, paid our medical to budget, even though those funds have savings. And so we decided that we should continue that practice, especially given the uncertainty going into these next few years with our medical expenses. So we paid our medical to budget so that we could further boost up that medical reserve that we have, which is something that the Auditor General had recommended we do, and our auditors have recommended that we do. So we continued that practice. So that might be part of the discrepancy that you're seeing, Gina.
Okay, thank you. Can I continue, Mr. Chair? Just one more thing of clarification for Larry.
By all means. Sorry. I was just trying to report. Go ahead.
In regards to what the external auditors said about carrying over the pilot from the state, we can carry that over after 12/31?
Yes. As
And-
explained to me, it's because it's based on, well, let me just say this here. If in fact if we know different, then we can't. Obviously, that's pretty obvious. If we learn different from the General Assembly before the audit is complete by December 31, and they have gone back into session, and they in fact have made an appropriation different than the amount that was expected, then of course we can't do that. But as it stands today, while the audit is going on and while there is no appropriation, but there was an expectation of that 34 million, what the outside auditors are saying is that it's permissible to carry it for reporting purposes so that you can complete your trial balances to get the auditors to do their work. And if there is any difference, we would have to true it up at that point. And we've shared that with Auditor General, and he's aware of that.
And if we find out in January that's when we're going to get the money, but it's not going to be the full amount, do we then have to go back and amend that audit?
Depending, I think based on the receivable, I don't think we would have to amend it. I think Auditor General Hoyle mentioned that we would offset the receivable with a payable to the pension plan, and that might be an alternative solution. But again, guidance was not provided on that, and I'm hoping that expectation will be completed by an appropriation that will be completed by the General Assembly first and foremost before December 31, and then with great expectation, I do hope that the appropriation will mirror the 34 million or some dollar amount, at least at a minimum, necessary to meet the outstanding pension obligation.
All set, Gina?
One last question.
Yep.
The transfer from October to the pension fund has been made?
Yes, as of today.
Yeah.
When you and I were talking earlier today, Madam Auditor, I did not have direct confirmation until I spoke to the Finance Director Silveria, but she confirmed for me that the transfer was complete. The funds arrived by the state on the last day of the month, and sometimes there's a lag between the two banking institutions, but it probably arrived on Thursday the 1st, and then with setting it up, and of course, every member of the administration is on work share, and most of them are on a Friday work share, so it got kicked over to today.
Usually I see a transfer, I get CC'd with the treasurer on a transfer. I just didn't see it. That's the only reason why I asked.
I'm sure the Finance Director and the Deputy can get that to you ASAP.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Auditor, you can always ask more questions. I just want to go to Councilman Taylor, then if you have further ones, we'll pick it up with you, okay? All right. Let the record reflect
Okay.
that President Matos is present. Chief Councilman Taylor?
Yes, I have a question. I know that we're doing work share to the end of the year. I guess my question would be that to Larry, I guess, why is one of the only revenue, like parking enforcement, they're off, from what I understand, they're off 2.5 days per week for the rest of the year, where everybody else is only off 1 day every 2 weeks. Why would the only revenue people be off double? I guess that's my question.
Councilman, while I won't speak for the agreement between the union and our HR director, as I was not part of those negotiations as to which positions were assigned which level of participation, it's my belief and my understanding that for two reasons. Parking naturally is off because of behavior and events that are not existing, number one. And number two, there is a parking moratorium that was declared by the administration in just about all the major business centers throughout the city, where parking enforcement would not be followed through on in terms of fines and penalties to motorists, as a means to encourage people to come into the city and in fact spend money in business and establishments. So one has a trade-off to the other, but I would suspect that had something to do with the decision.
Okay, and also second question, I saw where they come out with the early retirement for people over 28 years, whatever. Do we have a prediction on how many people would actually probably jump on that and what that would cost the city?
So once again, while HR and the union worked out the details of it, the knowledge that I have from those discussions and participated in with the finance team in pricing that is that there are two prongs to that incentive. If you're 65 years old or over with at least 10 years of service, there would be a $5,000 stipend. You would be able to take up to and no greater than 11 weeks vacation, given the fact that many people could not take vacation and were already bumping into a large vacation balance to begin with. So to preserve that was given consideration. And then they would be given no cost medical insurance. If they had a family plan, they could carry that for 2 years as a family plan, or if they took single coverage, they could carry that for 4 years. If you had 28 years of service at any age, you would get a $3,500 stipend, and I believe the same 11 weeks maximum that you would get, the 6 that you could carry and 5 that you would have got if you stayed till January automatically, basically as an incentive and an inducement to make that happen. And then I believe only 2 years of medical. It is my understanding that the greatest savings will come from those positions that will not be immediately refilled, and those that will be filled at a lower entry-level pay, will not be part of any longevity, will not be part of any step increases, et cetera, et cetera. So there's savings there, and those savings are being refined now in addition to the cost associated with the additional medical that would be paid through the medical fund. We have already been having discussions with our outside actuary, which we hope to have those discussions completed this week. I did hear from the internal auditor today, and she asked if I would be sharing any new assumptions based on the actuary's work already that they were doing for the next valuation, and then measure by any of these new changes if in fact it should go through. I have pledged that we would share that as soon as we do get that. I've asked the actuary to give us several scenarios based on how that would work, and while I don't have that yet in my possession, it will certainly be available to us in the next week or so. So the basic premise is that there would be a savings from unfilled positions or positions filled at a smaller salary at an entry level, along with by and large, I just think the opportunity to shrink the workforce. So,
Mr.
Is
Chair?
that only for 1033 workers?
yes, it is. 1033 only.
Yeah.
Please,
Can I just-
you-
just 2 points of clarification to Larry's analysis, if I may?
Yeah.
So the two groups, Group A that Larry referred to, the 65 and over, the health insurance that Larry was referring to is not the traditional city retiree health care. It's the post 65 health insurance.
That is correct. My apologies. I'm sorry.
No, but Larry, and that's one clarification. And then as far as the second group, Group B, the 28 years of service, that group is only, they're not going to receive city health coverage paid by the city. It would be City RX, and it would be Delta Dental. They would still be responsible for their payment of the health insurance. And the third point I'd like to make is that On the Group B, the 28 years, there's only a maximum of 45 individuals who would qualify based upon seniority.
Thank you.
But everything else that Larry said is totally accurate and correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. And Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Taylor, hang on. Hang on a second, Mr. Mancini. Chief Taylor, did that clarify your question or at all?
Yeah, no, it did. But I also wanted to know, when was the cutoff for that? Is that December 31st or beforehand?
They have to make the decision between October 1st and October 31st, I believe, with a expectation that they will be off payroll by December 31st.
And if someone, okay, let me give an example. If someone, say, gets a bump up from now to December, I don't know, they move up and I call it ranks because I'm used to fire department, but if they move up, they still can take that and then they'd actually be making out, right? Is that correct? Oh, say someone gets a promotion from blank to blank and then they retire, they can get 11 weeks vacation at that rate, correct?
Well, we didn't challenge that, but I guess you're right. I guess it would be paid at their last working rate.
Chief Solicitor,
And I-
did you want
and I don't think-
One second, Mr. Mancini. Chief Solicitor, did you want to weigh in? I think.
So no, I think Larry is right on. So whatever you would leave at, whatever position, and it was a higher paying position, you would be paid out at that rate for your vacation. However, it would be insignificant for 2 or 3 months of service.
I agree.
Because when you're doing the calculation on the highest 4, it's peanuts or pennies, if that.
And may I say, Mr.
Chief,
Chairman, if I may?
one second, Mr. Mancini. Chief, do you understand what the solicitor said?
No, I understand, but they're also going to get whatever sick days and whatever vacation they can get at the higher rate.
Is that correct, City Solicitor?
It's correct, and you're totally right on, Chief. On the sick time, 1033 gets a portion. They don't get the full amount. Vacation time, they get a dollar for dollar payout of what the days are. So you're correct, and it would be at the higher rate.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mancini?
So, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the solicitor for providing additional information. I was remiss. I didn't want to mislead the committee, but there was a provision that there was a limit on the number of individuals that could participate in the Group B, the so-called 28 years or more. The number is at 45. That's the maximum. In talking to bargaining unit officials, I'm told from them that they believe that list could number upwards of 120. If 120 were interested, it would be limited to the top seniority 45 individuals in that order. As to the chief's question, Chief Taylor, Councilman Taylor, based on a review of that list of the eligible employees, I don't think that 1% maybe would be positioned to leave their current position for what positions I do not know, but I do not suspect will become available during the last quarter of the year, given that we are under minimal essential hiring only, and we may have intentionally delayed filling positions where it doesn't cause any violation of the contract or does not impact any of the services supplied in the city. And I'm not saying that would be an intentional delay, but I think that we would use some jurisprudence and some wisdom in that. But even that, I want to say, won't have any impact on the final calculation of their retirement.
Thank you, Mr. Mancini. What I'd like to do is, I think there's a memo on this. If there's not already, just if you guys can follow up with that, Mr. Shiverini, Mr. Mancini, get it to the committee, get it to the internal auditor. Can we follow up now on where are we right now presently in how much cash is in whatever we want to call it, this rainy day account? How much cash?
10.4 million with 2.9 million pending to be transferred upon the acceptance of the trial balances by the external auditors, and pending no further audit adjustments. And if we stay within that balanced budget, ergo surplus position because of the rainy day, we expect that another 3 million could arrive, giving us at that point 13.2 million in rainy day cash.
Okay. All right.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may.
One second. Commitment, do you have any follow-up questions? Committee
No,
members?
Mr. Chair.
Internal Auditor, do you have any follow-up questions?
I don't know if it's a question or more of an explanation. Sarah, putting the medical to budget, how much excess was the budget that got put into that fund, and what is the purpose of that fund?
Let me look at my notes here. We have about 14 million in active fund balance, active retiree, and about 6 million in retiree medical fund balance. And that is typically when the medical budget is over, the general fund has to make that up. It's an internal service fund, so it's not allowed to carry a deficit. So at any end of any given year, if there's a deficit in that medical fund, the general fund would be responsible to make that up. And there's been years in the past where we've had to make up, a $2 million deficit that happened at year end that was unexpected, and that ends up being a general fund hit. In building up some reserves in the medical funds, we are positioned to weather those overages as they come along as like an unexpected medical emergency that was unplanned occur. So it's best practice to have 1/6 of your budget in a reserve. So at this point, we're right around that at a $108 million budget. So we are in a good fiscal condition in our medical funds right now.
Finance Director, do you have the most recent list of people who retired, positions that they retired from, and how many new hires the city has done in one of those positions?
I can get that. I don't have it right now, but I can get that for you.
Can you please provide that for this Thursday's finance meeting? I also want to know the cost, meaning that, like, did we, an administrative assistant who gets paid X retired, but then the city hired a community liaison for $150,000. I want to know the value, the position. I want to see what positions people have retired from and value of that, and whether it's, and what positions have been hired and what's the value of that, okay?
Yep. Are you talking in regards to the retirement incentive or retirement since a certain date?
I'm talking about, I want to get an understanding of how many folks have retired the past, for the sake of conversation, let's go for the past, 6 months, and how many people have been hired the past 6 months, and what was the cost, position, et cetera, okay? Meaning, did 50 people retire in the last 6 months, and we hired 150 people in the last 6 months? If so, what positions are they? See my point? Okay? And what departments and where we are, okay? Because we know the city's still hiring, but I'd like to know what sort of position they're hiring for. Okay, so want to see that laundry list for this Thursday, please. Okay? Okay. It's getting a little, committee members, do you have any other questions at this time?
No, Mr. Chair.
Council members?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, what I'll do is I'm going to continue, if it's okay to continue this conversation to the next Thursday, continuing. So I think we need to, it's a constant conversation. And then also, I asked the internal auditor, Mr. Mancini, Ms. Severa, internal auditor is going to send you folks a litany of some questions, some additional financial questions, in which I'd like you to have answers prepared for the Finance Committee this Thursday and the following meetings. Okay? So we have a little understanding that we want. Also, Ms. Severa, since you're the Finance Director, I'd like to understand also what have been the any type of expenditures that have not been, that we held off doing, meaning we chose not to buy, 5 new trucks, or we chose not to rent this building. Like, what are the things we've done of this past 3 months in particular to hold off on some of our expenses, okay? Not necessarily something that we, and by the way, and stuff that we also didn't pay that we are owed to pay. For example, let's say we owe a rent to somebody, but we haven't paid it yet. Or, so it's either that kind of scenario, or instead of renting out a new building, we chose not to rent this building. You get my point? What other financial frugal measures have we done the past 3 months in particular? And then what do we plan on doing the next 3 months? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Finance Director?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to have that prepared for Thursday also, all right? Okay, so it's getting late. I'd ask, first I want to thank all my committee members and council members participating, Ms. Mancini and Ms. Silvera and his financial team. What I'd ask is the committee if we could continue item number, what's the last item? Number 5 to next finance
So
committee meeting.
moved. So
Second.
moved.
Vice Chair, second by Councilman Taylor. Discussion? All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
So there's no more further business before this honorable committee. I'd ask a
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Vice Chair, second by Councilman Taylor. Discussion? I ask everybody to be safe and be well. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all.
I don't.
Thank you.
I don't.